Nobody warned you that your child's diagnosis would come with its own kind of grief. Now, not grief for your child, grief for the version of motherhood you had in your head before everything changed. That is what today's episode is about. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Chronic Illness Moms. If you're more than just a tired mom, I'm talking trying to make it through the day without crashing by noon while raising neurodivergent kids, you're not alone. I'm Ashley, a wife, mom, and certified health coach. I have lived with autoimmune disease and flare-ups that made everyday life feel harder than it should. After years of pushing through and burning out, I learned how much stress, poor sleep, and nervous system overload were driving my symptoms. Everything changed when I started building small, realistic habits that actually supported my body instead of fighting it. In this podcast, you'll learn simple habits that help you to feel better. So pop in your earbuds and take a break from the chaos. It's you time.
If you've been in survival mode for a while and you don't really even know where to start to get yourself feeling better, I want to encourage you to join me for one of my 1-hour Feel Better coaching sessions, where we're going to look at what is actually draining you, your energy, your nervous system, your sleep. All of it in the context of the real life that you're living, likely in a neurodivergent household. You leave with one clear next step that actually fits your schedule, not this long list of things you have to do. If you want to learn more, you can head to ashleybraden.com/coaching, or you can find the link down in the show notes below. Okay, so summer is the season when comparison can hit pretty hard. And I really don't think that that is an accident. When you think about it, in June and July, your social media feed often fills up with pool days and family road trips and cousins running through sprinklers together. Kids are at camp or doing some kind of sports thing. Moms look relaxed, sitting in a chair by a lake somewhere, not managing anything. And if your summer looks different, so maybe you have therapy appointments that don't stop, a kid who can't handle the unstructured days or going to a place like the lake, a body that's flaring from the heat and the schedule disruption, it can feel like you're watching someone else's life through a window. I remember sitting outside one summer evening, the kids were settled, the house was finally quiet, and I had this wave of something I couldn't really name. It wasn't really sadness. It wasn't regret. I was not really wishing that things were different in some kind of dramatic way. It was just more like this kind of quiet, low hum of awareness about everything that was different from what I thought that it would be. The spontaneous trips we couldn't take because that change in routine would cost too much. The day camps that weren't a right fit. The summers that I had imagined before I had kids. Easy, loose ones where we just go wherever and everyone would be fine. The ones that had nothing to do with sensory processing or flare days or bracing myself every morning for how the day might go. I sat with that for, maybe 30 seconds and then I redirected. But my kids are loved, but I'm so lucky, but look at everything we do have. And I want to say those things are all true. Every single one of them is absolutely valid and true. But what I was doing, and what I think a lot of us do, almost automatically without thinking about it, is we use gratitude as a way to skip over the feeling that we have not given ourselves permission to have. And grief that you skip over doesn't go away. It just gets buried. And it finds other ways to show up in being irritable. That seems like, hey, I don't know why. Why do I feel so stressed or irritable and I can't figure out what's going on? In this feeling of like flatness, emotionally flat that settles over you after a hard week, in the tears that you catch yourself off guard having over something that was small that shouldn't matter. And this is what I want to talk about. There's this concept in talking about grief, which is called ambiguous loss. The idea behind it is that there are losses that you experience that don't fit into the normal grief container. So they don't have a clear beginning and end. There's no funeral or socially recognized moment of mourning. And because of that, they often go unnamed, which means that they also often go unprocessed. What you're carrying as a special needs parent fits into this almost exactly. You didn't lose your child. You love your child completely and fiercely and without reservation. And I know that, but you did lose something. You lost the experience that you anticipated, the ease that you expected, the version of motherhood that you imagined that didn't include meltdowns or IEPs or advocating in every room you walk into and managing your own symptoms on top of that. And really, that is real loss, and it does deserve to be named. And this grief, it does tend to surface in very specific moments. So that meeting where you're advocating hard for your child and you're doing it well, and then afterward, you just sit in your car in the parking lot for a few minutes because Something about it just felt so overwhelming, or you realize your child's struggling in an area that you didn't pick up on and you feel like a failure. The birthday party where your kid struggles while everyone else's kids seem fine. And you're managing it and you're supporting them and you love them so fiercely. And also you're tired in a way that's hard to explain. And you wish that you could visit with other parents, but you need to be able to focus on your kid. Maybe it's that summer scroll through social media that I mentioned, where everyone else's highlight reel is right there, and you are comparing it to what your typical Tuesday actually looked like. These are the grief moments. So they are small sometimes they accumulate over time. And here's why this matters beyond just feeling validated for a minute. Because when we don't acknowledge grief, it tends to come out other places. And I mentioned this earlier. It shows up as chronic irritability that you can't explain. It is kind of this flat emotional numbness, going through the motions without really feeling present emotionally. Maybe it shows up as stress or guilt that seems to have no clear source, as that very specific, complete exhaustion that isn't just physical. Those are different ways that it can show up. And here's something that I want you to connect back to what we've been talking about really for a while, which is unacknowledged grief is a stressor that your body is carrying. We talked about how emotional stress translates into physical inflammation. We've talked about how your nervous system stays activated when those stressors stack on top of each other without any kind of release or that safety signal where you go out of fight or flight and back into rest and digest. The grief that goes unnamed is one of those stressors. So this quiet, chronic grief, it's real. It costs your body something even when you're not consciously aware that you're carrying it around. I'm just curious, does that sound familiar? Because I feel like for a lot of moms and moms that I've talked to who do have children that have some kind of specific need, some version of this is running in the background all the time. Again, it's not front and center. It's not something you're thinking about constantly, but it is there underneath. And it costs you something. It costs physical energy, nervous system energy that you genuinely don't have to spare as a mom who is trying to be there for your kids and also dealing with chronic symptoms. Now, the other thing I want to say is naming the grief doesn't mean you're complaining. It does not mean that you love your kid any less. It also doesn't mean that you are not grateful for your children. Grief and gratitude are not opposites. You can have both of them at the same time. I would say, in fact, really, you can only hold both if you let yourself actually feel both, instead of using gratitude to cancel out the grief. So you might be wondering, well, okay, that's great, but I'm afraid if I name the grief that I'm going to spiral and I'm going to sit in it all the time. Or you might be wondering, okay, what does naming my grief actually look like? Now, again, there are times when I do think, speaking to a therapist is always great. If there are times when we need to process through that. But I want to tell you some things that you can do at home to get a start on this. And then obviously you have your own discernment to say, is this something that I need to talk through with a therapist to get a little bit of a better handle on this and to really just process through it. But a great starting point can be just letting yourself think the thought all the way to the end instead of trying to redirect it or shove it down with gratitude. So what this can look like would be maybe you had the thought, I wish summer felt easier, or I miss the version of myself that had more energy for this, or I had a different picture of what life was going to be. And sometimes the difference between that and what is actually real is just really, really hard. Or maybe it was, today was heavy, and I'm allowed to say that. And then just let that be true. So not immediately attaching a but, like, I miss the version of myself that had more energy for this, but I'm glad that I have my kids. Instead, just let that be true. I miss myself. And the version of me that had more energy to do this, to keep up with my kids, to do life. And just sit with it for a minute. Not rushing to the silver lining, not qualifying it with an I know I'm lucky before you even finish the sentence. So there is actually some research on this, and the simple act of naming a feeling reduces its intensity. Your brain processes it differently when you give it language, when you say it out loud. You don't have to solve it or fix it or move past it immediately. You just have to name it. So it's just this. This is real. This is what I'm experiencing. I'm allowed to feel it. and that's okay. And I don't know if you've ever tried this. I have started doing this more and more, of naming it without feeling guilty and also not feeling like I have to immediately fix it, of just saying, this is real, I feel it. And what I have noticed for myself is that it really truly does decrease the intensity of the feeling. It also just allows me to stop essentially fighting with myself because it's like when we want to try to push back on it by adding a qualifier or adding gratitude, we really are just shoving the feeling that we are having down. We're not dealing with it. We're just trying to fight it off instead of just saying, hey, I do have this feeling. I do wish that I could go do fun things with my kids during the summer and it wasn't such a big thing. And that's okay. It's okay for me to wish that. And once I'm able to process through that, then I can say, okay, well, that's not my reality. And I'm okay with that because I've named the feeling. But what can I do with my kids? It just puts me in a different headspace where I can then accept that I have the feeling. And then I become more into the headspace of feeling like, well, this is reality, but here's what I can do, even though I can't do the thing that I wish I could do. And it opens up more opportunities for me. And, I do think that summer is a great season for this, especially when, like I mentioned earlier, that grief does tend to surface quite a bit. I also find around the holidays is another time where this happens a lot, because that contrast is so visible. Everyone else's highlight reel is right there in your face, and you've been white knuckling it through the year, managing appointments and therapies and your own symptoms. And summer is when that pace kind of loosens up a bit, just enough for the weight of everything to really land and hit you. And again, there's not something wrong with you. As humans, we all experience negative feelings, negative emotions. It doesn't mean you are a bad person or a bad mom. Just naming it, accepting that this is a feeling you have. It doesn't mean anything about you as a person. It doesn't mean anything about you as a mom. It's just you're a human experiencing a difficult situation. You're allowed to have those feelings. Obviously, feelings don't dictate what we do. Feelings don't dictate action. But owning those feelings helps our body to get out of that chronic stress of really those symptoms that come because we bury the feelings of grief. We don't want to address them because we feel guilty for them. Okay, so I want to say one more thing before I finish this episode up. The grief of the parenting experience that you thought you would have, it is not the same thing as wishing your child were different. And I do think that sometimes that is why we bury this feeling. And I know that you know that, but I feel like that grief creeps in and it blurs those two things together. And I just want to say clearly, they are not the same thing. Grieving the ease that you don't have, or the fact that your child isn't getting to experience something that you really wanted for them, is not the same thing as wishing for a different child. So grieving the version of yourself that felt healthy and present and capable is not the same thing as resenting who you are now. While yes, you might have chronic symptoms that you wish were different, you probably have also had a lot of life experience from those chronic symptoms that you've experienced. You've learned a lot and grown. And so it's not that you're wishing that it never happened to you or that you were different. You just wish that the situation were different. You can love every part of your child, their specific brain, their specific way of being in the world, all of it, and still feel grief that the path that they are taking and that you are taking, it looks different than what you expected. Those two things can exist at the same time. And if you are someone, and I have experienced this, I've pretty much anything I talk about with the podcast, I've been on both sides of it. So this is no different. I've been on both sides where I really wouldn't let myself grieve because it felt like a betrayal of my child or my faith or the fact that I wasn't being grateful. And I just want to say this really gently. The grief has been there anyway. It didn't go away. The feeling you had didn't go away. You've just been managing it alone without calling it what it is, without naming it for anyone else to hear, or really for you to even just say, this is the reality of what is going on for me right now. And I do think that giving it a name, it's not creating a problem. It's just finally accepting that, hey, one was already here. I was already feeling this feeling, but instead of trying to shove it down and act like it doesn't exist, I'm just going to name it for what it is. And that can be a really great way of learning to manage and carry the grief that you experience differently. And the reality is we all have grief in this life. Whether you have a child who has a special need or not, we all have situations or relationships or circumstances that don't turn out the way that we hoped that they would, that feel disappointing. And so this is something that happens to everyone. The fact that it might relate to your child, it doesn't make you a bad mom. Just remember that we all experience these feelings in life. Okay. Here's what I really want you to take from this episode. What you're feeling, that weight that you have that you feel like doesn't have a name, it probably is grief, real grief, even without this clear loss or this clear recognizable thing that someone else would understand why you're grieving. It's the grief of the experience that you thought you would have. And it's a completely valid feeling. Naming it does not mean that you are ungrateful. It just means that you're human. And unacknowledged grief, it does not disappear. It actually costs your body more than what you realize when you will not name it, when you shove it down. The other thing I want to remind you is that you absolutely can hold grief and gratitude at the same time, but only if you let yourself actually feel both. So we can't truly hold gratitude when we're shoving down grief and grief is constantly in the background. And at the same time, if we only focus on the grief without the gratitude, that really can bring us to a dark place as well. Okay, friends, your one small thing for this week is I want you to just name one thing that you're grieving or that you feel grief over. Just one. You can say it out loud. You can write it down. You can text it to yourself. You can share it with a friend. Whatever feels the most comfortable for you. Maybe you pray about it. But just let it be one true thing that you share without immediately falling with a but. But I'm grateful, but I have this, but I that. Just let it exist. Just let it say what it is without any kind of qualifier or anything to cancel it out for a minute. That's it. That's the one thing I want you to focus on. And if you want somewhere to share that, if you want someone to say it out loud to, with people who will actually understand, of course, we have our free Facebook community. I will have the link down in the show notes. And also, I will be back on Monday. And Monday's episode is one I've been thinking about for quite some time. It's talking about who you are when your diagnosis isn't the whole story. So I am excited for that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I'll see you back next time.
Hey friend, I hope you found today's episode helpful. If you did, would you take a minute to share it with another mom who's struggling with chronic symptoms? And leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It means the world to me to know this podcast is making a difference for you. All right, it's time for me to go tackle those snack requests, and remember that a short walk, even if the kids turn it into a race, still counts as self-care. Keep chasing those little wins. Even when it feels messy, you're making progress. The information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. I'm not a doctor, and this podcast is not intended to treat or diagnose any condition. You're the expert on your body. Listen to it and reach out to a trusted provider for support.